Letting go sounds beautiful in theory, until it's your life. Your memories, your attachment, your version of the future collapsing in front of you. Most people don't struggle because something ended. They struggle because a part of them still wants to negotiate with reality. They replay conversations in the shower. They stare at old messages late at night. They keep checking their phone, even after silence has already answered the question. And the painful part is, they know. They know the relationship changed. They know the chapter ended. They know the old version of themselves no longer fits. But familiarity is seductive. Even suffering can feel comforting when it's familiar enough. That's why people stay attached to things that quietly drain them. Not because it feels good, but because it feels known. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew the human mind resists endings. It clings to certainty, even painful certainty, because uncertainty feels like death to the ego. But growth has never been about holding tighter. Growth is learning what must be released. A tree does not argue with autumn. It lets go because it understands something humans often forget. What falls away creates space for renewal. And maybe that's where your peace begins too. Not in controlling what stays, but in accepting what's already gone. Because sometimes the reason you feel exhausted is not because life is heavy. It's because you're carrying things that were never meant to follow you into your next season. Release what no longer serves you. There comes a point in life where holding on becomes more painful than letting go. But many people never reach that realization because they confuse attachment with commitment. So they stay. They stay in relationships that feel emotionally empty. They stay loyal to versions of themselves they've already outgrown. They keep habits that destroy their peace simply because those habits feel familiar. And slowly, without noticing, their inner world becomes crowded with things that no longer belong there. The Stoics believed that wisdom is not just knowing what to pursue, it is knowing what to release, because not everything that once served you is meant to stay forever. Some people enter your life to teach you discipline. Others teach you boundaries. Some experiences break your heart, only to reveal where you abandoned yourself. That doesn't make them permanent. But the mind hates endings. It keeps trying to revive what reality already buried. It says, maybe things will change. Maybe if I try harder. Maybe I'm giving up too soon. But there's a difference between patience and self-abandonment. Real peace begins when you stop forcing life to repeat a chapter that already ended. Look honestly at your life. What are you still feeding that no longer feeds you back? What thoughts are keeping you trapped in old pain? What expectations are quietly stealing your ability to be present? Not everything needs to be carried forever. Some things were meant to shape you, not stay with you. And the moment you stop clinging to what no longer aligns, something unexpected happens. Your energy returns. Your mind clears. Your life becomes lighter. Not because you lost something valuable, but because you finally stopped carrying dead weight. Stop resisting change. Most suffering does not come from change itself. It comes from resistance. From the exhausting attempt to keep life frozen in a form that no longer exists. People resist change in quiet ways, not dramatic ways. They delay difficult conversations. They stay emotionally attached to people who already left mentally. They revisit old memories like touching a bruise, just to confirm it still hurts. And all of it comes from the same fear. If I let this go, who will I become without it? That question terrifies people more than pain itself. The Stoics understood that life is movement. Nothing remains untouched forever. Relationships evolve, identities shift, priorities change. And suffering begins the moment you demand permanence from a temporary world. Think about how much energy people waste trying to force things, forcing connection, forcing timing, forcing themselves to stay in spaces that no longer reflect who they are. Eventually, the soul grows tired from pretending, and that exhaustion becomes anxiety, overthinking, emotional numbness, not because life is cruel, but because the inner self knows something the mind refuses to accept. This chapter is over, and strangely enough, acceptance is where peace begins. Not dramatic acceptance, not giving up, just a quiet honesty. This no longer belongs in my life. That moment changes everything, because when you stop resisting reality, your mind becomes still enough to hear yourself again. You stop chasing what keeps running. You stop begging for clarity from confused people. You stop trying to resurrect expired versions of your life. And in that space, something powerful appears. Freedom. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that arrives when you finally stop fighting what was already trying to leave. Peace requires inner pruning. Peace is not something you find. It's something you protect. Most people think inner peace comes after success, after more money, more validation, more certainty. But the Stoics understood something deeper. A crowded life creates a crowded mind, and a crowded mind can never rest. Sometimes, the reason you feel exhausted is not because life is heavy, it's because you keep carrying what should have been released months ago. Old resentment, fake obligations, relationships that drain more than they nourish, versions of yourself you no longer recognize. A tree cannot grow if every dead branch remains attached to it, and neither can you. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about removing the unnecessary, not because simplicity looked good, but because clarity required it. Every distraction steals attention from what truly matters. Every unresolved attachment quietly taxes your energy. Look honestly at your life. How much of your stress comes from things you secretly know no longer belong? The endless scrolling, the need to explain yourself, the habit of saying yes just to avoid disappointing people, the constant comparison disguised as ambition. None of these create peace. They create noise. Inner pruning is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront what you've tolerated. It asks difficult questions. What am I holding on to out of fear? What part of my life survives only because I refuse to face the truth? But this is where freedom begins. Not in adding more, in removing what weakens you. Real peace is selective. It requires boundaries, discipline, silence, the courage to disappoint others so you stop abandoning yourself. And slowly, after enough pruning, something changes. Your mind becomes quieter. Your decisions become cleaner. Your life begins to feel lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because you finally stopped feeding what was destroying your peace from within. Let go of victimhood. Victimhood is seductive because it explains everything. It gives you a reason for your anger, your stagnation, your fear. It turns pain into identity, and after enough time, you stop seeing yourself as someone who experienced suffering. You start seeing yourself as suffering itself. That is the trap. The Stoics never denied pain. They simply refused to build a home inside it. You may have been betrayed, ignored, rejected, humiliated. But once you make those moments your identity, you hand your future over to the past. And the past never gives power back willingly. A victim waits. A Stoic adapts. That is the difference. Many people spend years replaying the same story in different forms. They ruined me. Life was unfair. If things had been different, I would have become more. Maybe. But maybe that story is now the very thing keeping you trapped. Epictetus was born a slave. Yet he taught that freedom begins in the mind, because even when life limits your circumstances, you still control your response, your attitude, your discipline, your character. That is where real power lives. Victimhood feels safe because it removes responsibility. If everything is someone else's fault, you never have to change, never have to risk failure again, never have to confront your own patterns. But healing starts the moment you ask a different question. Not, why did this happen to me? But, who do I become now? That question changes everything. Because your wounds may explain your behavior, but they do not excuse staying asleep forever. The Stoic path is not about pretending you're unaffected. It's about refusing to let pain become your permanent identity. You are not the betrayal, not the rejection, not the failure. You are the person standing after it. And that person still has a choice. Choose creation over blame. Blame feels productive. It gives the illusion that you understand why your life feels heavy. You point at a person, a system, a past event, and say, that's the reason. Maybe it is. But blame has a hidden cost. It freezes movement. Because the longer you focus on who caused your pain, the less energy you have to build beyond it. The Stoics understood this clearly. They knew life would often be unfair. People would disappoint you. Circumstances would break your plans. But they also knew that complaining changes nothing. Creation does. A weak mind asks, who ruined this? A disciplined mind asks, what can I build from this? That shift is where personal power begins. Look around carefully. Most people are emotionally addicted to outrage. They replay problems daily. They rehearse arguments in their heads. They collect validation from others who are equally stuck. But nothing grows there. Blame creates emotional noise. Creation creates direction. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire during war, betrayal, and chaos. Yet his writings rarely obsessed over who wronged him. Instead, he focused on how he must respond, calmly, rationally, with discipline, because that is the only part truly under your control. You do not need perfect conditions to move forward. You need responsibility. You need the willingness to stop waiting for life to become easier and start becoming stronger yourself. And creation is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like building healthier habits, choosing silence instead of reaction, starting again quietly after failure, walking away from environments that poison your mind. Small actions, repeated consistently. That is how a new life is built. So, ask yourself honestly, what are you creating right now? A future shaped by resentment, or one shaped by purpose? Because every day, whether consciously or unconsciously, you are building something. The Stoic chooses to build forward, even after pain, even after disappointment, even after loss. Especially then, lead yourself beyond limitation. Most limitations are invisible. They don't look like walls. They sound like thoughts. I'm too late. I've always been this way. People like me never succeed. I'll probably fail again. And after repeating those thoughts long enough, they stop feeling like fear. They start feeling like identity. That is how people imprison themselves without realizing it. The Stoics believed that the greatest battle was never external, it was internal, a battle between the higher self that seeks discipline and the lower self that seeks comfort, between who you could become and who your excuses keep you being. Self-leadership begins the moment you stop obeying every emotion that visits you. Because emotions change hourly, principles remain. A weak day does not require a weak decision. A painful season does not require a hopeless mindset. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that the obstacle itself could become the path, not because suffering is beautiful, but because hardship reveals character. It exposes where you are mentally undisciplined, where fear still controls you, where comfort still owns your choices. And that awareness is a gift. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. The Stoic acts first and allows confidence to catch up later. He understands that growth rarely feels comfortable while it's happening. It feels uncertain, lonely, slow. But every time you choose discipline over impulse, clarity over distraction, responsibility over excuses, you reclaim authority over your life. That's leadership, not over others, over yourself. The truth is, nobody is coming to unlock your potential for you. Nobody can walk the difficult road of self-mastery in your place. At some point, you must decide that your future deserves more than your current excuses. And when you finally make that decision, something shifts. You stop asking life for permission. You begin leading yourself forward, even while afraid. At the end of life, it will not be the loud moments that shaped you most. It will be the quiet decisions. The moments you chose peace over pride, truth over attachment, growth over familiarity. The moments you stopped forcing what no longer belonged in your life. That is the real art of letting go, not becoming cold, not pretending you never cared, but learning how to release without losing yourself in the process. Because letting go is not weakness. It is emotional maturity. Anyone can cling. Anyone can react. Anyone can stay trapped in old stories out of fear of the unknown. But it takes strength to accept reality without bitterness, to walk away from what no longer aligns, to trust that your future does not depend on holding on to the past. The Stoics understood this deeply. Life is change. People change. You change. And suffering often begins the moment we demand permanence from temporary things. But when you stop resisting that truth, life becomes lighter, clearer, more honest. You no longer chase closure from people who cannot provide it. You no longer build your identity around old wounds. You no longer waste years carrying emotional weight that was never meant to follow you forever. Instead, you become grounded, calm in uncertainty, present in difficulty, disciplined in chaos. That is the quiet power of letting go. And maybe that is what freedom truly is. Not controlling everything around you, but no longer needing to. So if something in your life is asking to be released, listen carefully. Stop fighting the ending. Stop bargaining with reality. Thank the lesson. Carry the wisdom. And move forward lighter. Because every time you let go of what weakens your spirit, you make space for a stronger version of yourself to emerge.